Hi and welcome. You know those videos where everything is nice, lighting, camera, and the mechanic knows exactly what they are doing? Well, this is completely different. In this video I will explain how to service the DT Swiss hub. The model in this case is XR20, and I will explain the basic principles, gotchas, catches, caveats, and I will explain how to disassemble it, how to assemble it, and what to pay attention to. This is the model for quick release. So in order to disassemble this hub, the first thing is you need to do is to remove these lock nuts, to loosen them. And there is nothing to hold the cone wrench against, so I need to just use two 17mm wrenches for the rear hub and just see whichever one loosens first. Okay, this is the left one loosened first. Alright, so we'll start from that side. I've already cleaned and serviced this. We had some problems with batteries, camera and sound, so this is the second take, and I hope I will be able to salvage the part of the video where I showed everything in detail. So first thing to do is to pull this out. You might have problems if this is stuck, rusted, anything, and so maybe use some sort of rug and pull it out, or even use a thing like this that lets you, with soft jaws in a vise, keep in place different diameters and then just pull the whole wheel. Also to note, I have already removed the disc and the cassette. Generally, I have videos showing how to remove discs and cassettes. I'll put in the video description and make it pop up in your top right hand corner when I upload this, if I don't forget. But generally, I think it's a good idea to remove those. You reduce the risk of injuring yourself or damaging or warping the disc, bending it or similar. So it's for me it's easier to do without those. And now as I've serviced this, I can easily remove it by hand, but don't expect things to go too smoothly generally. So this is out. Okay, so this is the left hand side. And now what happens next is that on some DT Swiss hubs there is on the drive side a small ring with teeth for ratcheting mechanism that is screwed into the hub shell. And if you have a hub like that, you need to remove this by hand and unscrew that with a special tool that costs an arm and a leg. And the problem is that ratcheting mechanism holds the right hand side bearing in place inside the hub. And if you try to just use a hammer and whack this out, you will have problems. You will damage something, bend the axle or damage the bearing or the ratchet. So with those hubs you need to pull this off by hand. In order to pull it off by hand you need a lot of force, or you can mount the cassette and use that as a lever as you're pulling against the wheel. So you need to be a bit creative when things get stuck. But with this model it just takes a hard hit by a hammer. But I'm mentioning this because I know of those hubs, and if you try to whack those with a hammer you will get in trouble. So in this case I will use a 6mm bolt to hold it, to put it here, to not hit directly onto the axle, to avoid damaging it. And I will use a heavy hammer and just give it a good whack and hold my hand on the opposite side to not let this fall out. I had this fall out and the parts all over the place. Okay, this is out. As far as hammer goes, I think we're done. Now I can gently pull this off, and this is what we have. Here, this is very difficult job for the cameraman, I'm very sorry. And here we have the lock nut on the other end, and we have a bearing. I hope you can see it. That bearing should sit inside here. Now it's been whacked out by the axle. And we also have another bearing on the Freehub itself. Now in order to remove this, I could not find any other way except for using this like soft jaws for the vise, and try to insert it. Let's just try to make it work. Okay, I need to grip this firmly, very firmly, but not too much so that I don't squash or break the axle. And now I can try to remove the other lock nut. This will go with great difficulty. I had used anti-seize paste and cleaned this, so it's now going super easy like on an advert, but it is a bit more tricky. So we have this lock nut out, and now I can get this out of the vise and use just my hands. Okay. So this now moves too easily off. Here this is the right hand side dust cover, and this is the bearing that we had just punched out. When you are installing new bearings, pay attention that if you have bearings like these, the red should go on the outside because it provides more protection from dust and dirt intrusion. And in this case we are using bearings that are symmetrical, so both sides are equal. Okay, so here is another bearing, that is the Freehub bearing, and you needn't specifically replace it when you're servicing these hubs, but if you wish to do that, it has this like a spring that locks it, that has holes, and a tool like this will work great. So I will try to get these inside and press them together and hopefully pull it out. Here it is, just making sure not to have it fly. Okay, so here it's out, and now I can punch this bearing out. You can use DT Swiss axle with a hammer to punch them out, or use bearing pullers. I have a video on my Unior set of bearing pullers. I'll put that in the video's description and make it pop up in your top right hand corner. So that is my preferred method for pulling the bearings out, but anyway, that's how you can pull this bearing out and replace it. For now, as we've already serviced this, thanks to the camera glitch, I can just put this back in and hopefully salvage the video of my... So I need to now just put this together and press this in and use my hand to make sure they drop into the groove, get into the groove, as Madonna says. So here it's now into the groove. This is the... just let me point it. There is a small groove here, and so this is aligned inside all the way around, and that's good. That keeps this bearing locked securely in place, and on the inside it's this is a bit indented, the inside of the hub, so that the bearing can only go to a certain depth and cannot go any further. Now the trick about installing bearings. Let's see, we have the left hand side bearing left. Sorry, this is the front hub, we need to do that. We have the left hand side bearing left, and we can also again use the axle to punch it out, or to use the bearing puller, and that goes for the bearing removal. Sorry. Now for the bearing installing, I will drop some things. For bearing installation, I will explain the procedure and show it. We will do it, but first I wish to tackle this situation here. I'll try to salvage the video if I manage, but here we have these poles, 1, and the other. They are held on by a spring, and that spring goes, let me see, here, I hope you can see it. This, the smallest indentation here, that's where the spring goes, and it has this like a small angular thingy that it uses to catch itself on, and that's where it should rest. And these poles are put at a slight angle. They are not completely one on the opposite side of the other. That is a brilliant design because they are relatively great in size, and thanks to them being a bit offset, they can engage on on fewer degrees of the rotation of the Freehub. Because here you can see the Freehub has these things that the poles catch onto, and thanks to them being offset, they are practically doubling the density of these without making them smaller and more dense, if you understand what I mean. So that is a very nice design, and because the metal deforms elastically when you apply load, regardless of how many poles you have, and those new ratchet systems with 100 small notches, always only one of these can carry a load effectively, because the rest will just be maybe sitting in the groove but not carrying any load because of the metal's elastic deformation. So I prefer a design like this. It's simple, it's robust, and it does a good job. This is a very old hub and it is still working. As for the lubrication goes, I use some very soft grease. I hope you can see it here. That is grease for Shimano internal gear hubs. This is the grease that I'm talking about, and alternatively you can use oil, even though these springs, the spring that holds the poles in place is not too weak, so they don't seem to be sticking when I use this grease, and so the grease is more durable, it stays in place for longer, so that's why I opted for that. And there is this ring that holds these roller bearings. Now in order to remove it, you need to first pull out each of these bearings individually. You need to pull them out one by one, like this, and once you've pulled out at least half of them, then you will be able to just remove this whole plastic set and clean it. Without doing that, the diameter will be inside smaller, and so you will not be able to get it over this wider section. So I will try to put a sped up video of the procedure of putting this back in, but that is the trick. So you cannot just pry it out directly, it won't move even when you remove the poles. So that is the trick. And for lubricating this, I use some high quality grease, so not super soft grease but normal grease, to keep them in place and make it easier for me to install them. And so for cleaning, you just take a cloth and some degreaser or diesel or whatever, or even if you're replacing bearings, then you can use the disc brake cleaner to quickly and more expensively just get rid of all the old grease and dirt and everything. So that's the basic principle for reassembly and disassembly. And now how to install bearings. That is the tricky part. Why? Because you cannot use a bearing press and install bearings because of this axle, how it is designed. So you need to first put it in. You can use the bearing press to install, for example, left hand side bearing, all right, but then for the right hand side you have a problem, and so you first need to, the longer shaft goes for the left hand side, so that's also important to note. It's not symmetrical. Okay, so now we need to install this one. I will put some anti-seize on this. Okay, place it in place. And now I need to improvise a bit, because my standard bearing driver set will not go over the axle, and I cannot use my bearing installment kit, about which I already made a video that I will also put in this video's description and make it pop up. So I need to use some sort of a hack And the important thing is to make sure that this is wide enough to press on the outer race of the bearing, so not to be pressing it on the inner race. It can be damaged. It's better to press it on the outer edge, and this will do just that. Another thing is important to pay attention to. We'll show it on the left hand side bearing. So you see it is recessed a bit inside. So I don't want to use anything wider to get stuck on this edge. I want it to press all the way, so it needs to be smaller than the diameter of the hub that I'm pressing in, but still large enough to press against the bearing race. So you need to improvise a bit and have different kinds of adapters for your particular hub. So in this case we will try to use this and see how we fare. I will use this quick release lever to exert force and press this in place, and to not be pushing directly against the axle, I will put back the left hand side this plastic seal and put the lock nut back in, and I will put some anti-seize paste on the lock nut's face to prevent it from seizing in the future, so that I can do a quick and easy job in hopefully not less than a few years time of nice riding. So I'll screw this on just finger tight for now. Okay, I use this that I showed in the video about servicing cup and cone hubs, and I will put this on. This spacer allows me to put pressure on the face of this nut and not on the face of the axle, to not risk damaging the threads. So here now the other side, just making sure this is aligned. I've put some anti-seize on the outside of the bearing, and now I can place this and screw this on, and now I can just close this quick release lever and have this push the bearing inside. Now I open it, retighten and repeat. Okay, I think we're done here. Okay, it's no longer going anywhere. I don't want to force it too much. This is good. It's sitting all the way in. Okay, I can now unscrew this and repeat the process with the Freehub in place. Now when mounting the Freehub, there is this rubber seal. I tried orienting it differently, and it's not faring very well. It causes a lot of binding and resistance. So it definitely goes in this place. This is a used hub, so I wasn't sure if it was assembled correctly, and this seal is pointing this way, and it slides into the hub like this. So that is how it's supposed to be. I did test it to make sure, and yes, that is the only way that works. So I cannot put it directly. It will hit against this. So I need to work it a bit without force to make sure that it aligns with those poles, and then I can easily slide it in. So don't force it. Okay, now it's back in place, and its bearing is already installed, so I don't need to worry about that one. I can now put this end cap, and I've already put some grease on it and on its side, so that I can move it out easily afterwards. And of course I put some anti-seize paste on the axle itself, on the parts where these things slide. I forgot to mention that, but that should also help me later on when servicing. And all that's left now to do is to put the other lock nut back in place. The serrated edge that holds the wheel in place is on the outside, and the smooth edge is on the inside. So screwing it finger tight first. Okay, and now all I need to do is tighten the lock nuts, and so I need two 17mm spanners, and making sure it's tight but trying not to overdo it. And it spins smoothly, this spins smoothly, it locks in place, nothing feels binding. Of course, test ride is the ultimate test, but this looks to be okay, and we've replaced the bearings and it's now ready to roll. So I think I've covered everything. I will see what footage I can salvage to show the details. I don't have the time to do it everything once again completely, but I hope I've explained the most important things and problems that you can run into and what to pay attention to. And I hope you find this video helpful. Thank you very much for watching, and if you have some other tips, some easier way to do it, please use the comment section below. If you have some tool recommendations that will make this simpler and easier, also I'm very eager to learn and to try other stuff, especially if they make my work easier and faster. So thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in some other video. Cheers and stay cool.